Imagine for a moment that you stand in front of the mirror and look into your own eyes. What do you see? Probably someone tired, maybe frustrated, or even lost. But what truly matters is not what you see at that moment, but what you decide to do after you look away. We live in a society obsessed with appearances, with visible achievements, with the big names that appear in history books. However, what truly defines who you are is not your external successes, but how you face your internal battles. And believe me, we all have internal battles. When we think of historical figures like Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, Albert Einstein, or Nelson Mandela, we tend to idealize their lives as if they were perfect, as if they were born knowing exactly what to do with their existence. But here's the truth. They also had doubts, fears, and insecurities. The difference does not lie in being better people, but in how they decided to face themselves. They understood something that many of us are still trying to figure out. Purpose is not found outside, but within. And within you, there is chaos that can become your greatest ally if you learn to manage it. Human beings are walking paradoxes. On one hand, we want to be accepted, loved, admired. On the other, we fear that if someone truly knew us, with all our imperfections, they would reject us. So we create masks, act the way we think others expect us to act, and little by little, we lose touch with our true essence. We become prisoners of our own illusions, convinced that happiness lies in reaching the next goal, in having more money, more recognition, more things. But when we finally get there, we realize that something is still missing. And what's missing isn't outside, it's inside. Within each of us exists a hidden part, an unexplored territory full of timid emotions, buried desires, and aspects of ourselves that we'd rather not see. Carl Jung called this the shadow. It's not something bad, though it may sound intimidating. It's simply everything we've decided to ignore because it makes us uncomfortable, embarrasses us, or scares us. Perhaps it's that anger that arises when you least expect it, that laziness that keeps you from moving forward, or that envy you feel towards someone more successful. What many people don't understand is that these emotions don't disappear just because you ignore them. On the contrary, the more you repress them, the more power they have over you. But here's the twist. Your shadow is not your enemy. In fact, it can be your best teacher if you learn to listen to it. Every emotion, every uncomfortable thought has something to teach you. The key is to stop running from them and start asking yourself, why am I feeling this? What do I need to learn from this experience? What message is my unconscious sending me? When you begin to ask these kinds of questions, you realize that your shadow is not a monster to fear, but a reflection of who you really are. And only when you accept all parts of yourself, both the bright and the dark, can you start living authentically. Now, accepting your shadow doesn't mean you should act on it all the time. It's not about unleashing your anger without control or giving in to laziness. It's about understanding that these emotions have a purpose, and if you use them correctly, they can propel you forward. For example, anger can be a sign that someone has crossed your boundaries and that you need to defend yourself. Laziness might be a warning that you're exhausted and need rest. Even envy can motivate you to improve, as long as you don't get stuck in the feeling itself. The trick is learning when and how to use these emotions to your benefit. This process of self-knowledge is not easy. In fact, it can be extremely painful. Many people prefer to avoid it because they fear what they might discover. But here's the reality. If you never face your inner demons, they will continue to control your life from the shadows. You'll find yourself repeating the same patterns over and over, trapped in a cycle of frustration and discontent. On the other hand, when you decide to look inward and confront what you find, you start taking control. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and become the architect of your own life. Once you begin to integrate your shadow, something interesting happens. You start to feel more whole. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone, not even to yourself. You understand that you don't have to be perfect to be valuable, that your flaws don't define you, but neither can you ignore them. True greatness doesn't lie in eliminating your weaknesses, but in learning to coexist with them. And when you reach this point, when you're no longer afraid of who you are, you start living in a completely different way. Living authentically doesn't mean everything will suddenly be easy. There will still be hard days, moments of doubt, and difficult decisions. But now you have something you didn't have before: clarity. You know who you are, what you want, and where you're going. And that changes everything. You no longer live reacting to what happens around you. You take control and decide how you want to respond. If something isn't working, you change it. If something makes you unhappy, you let it go. If something inspires you, you pursue it with everything you have. This is where action comes into play, because self-knowledge alone is not enough. You can spend years exploring your inner world, but if you don't do anything with what you discover, you'll remain stuck. The purpose of life is not found in contemplation. It's not about what you think or say, but what you do. If you want to write a book, don't wait for inspiration to strike. Sit down and write. If you want to help others, don't wait for someone to give you permission. Find a way to contribute. If you want to change something in your life, don't wait for the circumstances to be perfect. Start today with what you have. Of course, action also involves risk, and that's where fear comes in. The fear of failure, of rejection, of not being enough. But here's the truth about fear. It will never completely disappear. It will always be there, lurking in the shadows. The difference between those who achieve something significant and those who don't is that the former decide to act despite the fear. They don't ignore it, but they also don't let it control their lives. Instead of running from it, they face it. They ask themselves, what could happen? How can I prepare for it? And then they take the next step, even if their knees are shaking. In the end, the purpose of life is not something you find. It's something you create. It's not a destination you arrive at, but a path you build with every decision you make. And that path doesn't have to be grand or spectacular. It can be filled with small moments, everyday gestures, silent decisions that no one else sees. What matters is not the size of your actions, but their authenticity. What matters is not what the world thinks of you, but how you feel about yourself at the end of the day. So I'll say it again. Stand in front of the mirror, look into your eyes, and ask yourself one simple but powerful question. Who am I really? Not who you think you should be, not who others expect you to be, but who you are in your deepest essence. And when you have an answer, don't just stay there. Act. Change what needs to be changed. Build what needs to be built. And remember, though the road may be difficult, it's worth it. Because in the end, the only life that truly matters is yours. And you are the only one responsible for giving it meaning. Subscribe if you want more content like this, where we talk without filters and without fear about what many need to hear. See you in the next video.